to day 4. Yes, it's Thursday of the Before I Die New Mexico Festival. I'm Gail Rubin, the Doyenne of Death and coordinator of this festival. So glad to welcome you here in the room at Passages International headquarters, where we thank you for hosting us today. We've had a great Death Cafe discussion and gotten a tour of the facilities. And now we are going to talk about green burial and home funerals. And there's a lot to know about this. And we've got some really expert people here to tell us about it. Brian Beard and Claire McFadden, is it?
Yeah.
There's that
It's
Y in there, I know. Yeah. They are the owners of La Puerta Natural Burial Ground. Liz Hamilton is a former funeral director and now working with Parting Stone. Michael Garcia, a funeral service practitioner with Cope Funeral Home?
Memorial Chapel.
I'm sorry, I have it written down. I don't even see it. Hope Memorial Chapel and Gallup. And he works with a lot of Native Americans. So let's have Brian and Claire talk about natural burial to get started. And,
Right.
and actually, they're all going to introduce themselves and how they got into this business.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you for putting on this panel and this event. We really appreciate being a part of it. Thank you, Darren, for hosting this space. We are the owners of Natural Burial New Mexico and the cemetery La Puerta Natural Burial Ground. It's a 40-acre cemetery that have been deeded natural burial ground. We've been in the business for almost 2 years. We purchased it from the previous owners, Dr. Donald Key and Linda Canyon. They started it in 2016 with the first burial in 2017.
How we got into the business is we're kind of outsiders coming in. So neither of us really had a background in the death industry. But we were very familiar with La Puerta because we knew Linda and Donald very well. Brian has a background in industrial design, and he actually had the reason why he got into industrial design was memorial design. So
Yeah,
the opportunity arose, and we were both in a position where we were kind of ready to take a dive into something new and something more meaningful to us. So we took the chance and we did it. So yeah, and now we're here.
Yeah. So natural burial is a lot of like it sounds. There's no embalming. The container that the decedent is placed in is of natural materials that will biodegrade over time. The burial plots at our specific cemetery are roughly 5 by 10, and we dig the grave about 3.5 to 4 feet deep. The families all participate in lowering of the decedent into the ground, and they're welcome to place the initial earth or even close the grave if they like. They're welcome to have any type of service that they would like. So we are there as training wheels in a way to kind of assist them through the process of burying a loved one. We have what's called the final ride cart that the decedent will be placed on, and they're welcome to walk the decedent to the graveside and have whatever service they'd like out there. So we're really there just to support families with whatever kind of service they would like to do. We have a couple consecrated sections of the cemetery. So we have a Catholic section, a Jewish section, a family section where families can buy multiple plots together. And we also have a general section. That's where a lot of people end up going. We work with funeral homes quite frequently.
So yeah, we do. So with natural burial, really the goal is to minimize the impact on the environment, reduce the amount of carbon that is involved in the burial process, and to really allow the ground and the land to be restored back to a healthy ecosystem. So with our burial ground, we are a certified natural burial ground with the Green Burial Council. So there are criteria that we have to meet, and we have to manage the land in a certain way to meet those criteria to be able to be certified. So if you are interested in green burial, if you're interested in green death care, Green Burial Council has a ton of resources about what that is, what the different criteria are, what who is a certified green funeral home or green burial ground. So we encourage you to look at that if you're interested in green burial. But we also, you know, with natural burial, we work with people who have done home funerals, and people who work with who have funeral homes help them with the process. So we see kind of both ends of the spectrum with that. And we actually have a video, a slideshow that we can show you, which gives you a really good idea of what a natural burial looks like. This family gave us permission to use this slideshow that they put together. And they actually did a home funeral. So they did everything from start to finish, except for the death certificate. They did have a funeral home help them with the death certificate, but they cared for their loved one at the home. They washed her, they clothed her, they actually made the shroud for her. They transported her to the burial ground. So really from start to finish, they were involved, which was a really beautiful thing. But we can show that now if we want, just so you can kind of see what that looks like, and then we can kind of move on and let other people talk.
So, yeah, that was the Blaisdell family. They did a wonderful job, start to finish. They worked as a group and they took on the task together, and that's really what's important when doing a home funeral.
Nice. All right.
So that's your land or their land?
That's
that
the-
was La Puerta. Mhm.
Is there any type of headstone or anything?
Oh, yeah. So families are welcome to decorate the grave however they like, as long as they're using natural materials like natural stone or native plants. Essentially, we'll try to help the plants get established, but it's pretty harsh environment. I mean, it's desert, so only so many plants will actually
But
survive.
we do make headstones, which they lay flat to the ground. They're made out of flagstone. And so all headstones have to lay flat to the ground, and they have to be made of natural stone and no polishing of the stone or anything. It
Yeah.
has to be natural. But yeah, so people can have headstones if they want, but they have to be flat. And
20
yeah.
by 20 inches is the recommended.
but that varies between different cemeteries, cemeteries. So if you're conservation burial ground, they have different requirements than we do. That's like another step up from natural burial, where they're actually conserving. They have a trust that they are working with a conservation program to help restore that land and make it for indefinitely conserved. So
Yeah.
Can you have a casket as well?
yeah,
Of course, yeah.
so passages, we get a lot of our
Willow
containers from passages
carriers,
because they're
yeah,
all
coffins.
green burial certified, and they are fully biodegradable and made of fast growing fibers and renewable fibers. So yeah.
You mentioned the depth of the grave is 3 to 4 feet. That's too low.
3.5 to 4 feet. Depending on the container that we use, we'll go a little deeper. But the idea with natural burial is that you're somewhat close to the surface, so the microbes and water and oxygenation can get to the body to help work as compost for what's at the surface. If you go too deep, the body will mummify.
There's not enough
So
oxygen.
yeah, so that's kind of the thing, is anything past
Or could
6 feet,
mummify.
5 feet, 6'5", yeah, could mummify. So it just takes longer. essentially.
But we don't want to go too shallow because we want to make sure that things can't
Right.
get in there. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Please speak louder.
So okay, sorry.
Yes.
Being able to walk.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a valid concern. So we dig every 5 burial plots. So we open a grave every 5. Essentially that gives the ground time to resettle with time essentially. So right after a burial, the ground's going to be very soft. We actually mound the grave so that when it settles back down, it'll be you can still tell that it's a grave, but it's officially settled. But to your point about how the ground there is so dense, it's kind of like concrete at a certain depth, so it doesn't cave in on the sides. You probably saw in that video, we have a frame that goes around the edge, and that's for people to walk on. It disperses the weight so that it's safe for everyone, because you see we lower with rope. So
And also with natural burial, a lot of times people are buried in things that are, there are exceptions, like the pine boxes have more of a difference from the body too. But usually what you see with that collapsing is that's where the
whatever void was in the container has
kind of
gave way.
collapses. But in a shroud, there's not quite as much. There's still definitely settling, but not, you don't see it as drastic.
Yeah, almost every grave will settle.
Yeah.
Some. So
And we'll adjust,
We tend to.
if it grave settles a lot, we will fill it in and make sure that it's.
Do you do any compacting?
We don't. That's why we mound, so that we have excess soil on the top, and then it'll do it itself naturally. So
What maintenance do you do after? Do you rake it down or?
Oh, so we mound the grave with a rake, and it's essentially just the mound. Any maintenance would be just remounding it or getting tumbleweeds off of it. We are, trying to put grass seed there, so that will help.
Native grasses.
Native grass, rather, yeah.
And people will plant yucca and things like that on those graves. So it really, the families actually care for their loved ones' graves most of the time. They come out and people will decorate them, they'll plant things, they'll take care of those plants. So it really is a family-led effort to care for, but we maintain the whole, well, mainly Brian maintains the whole thing, so.
Yes.
Have to make an appointment to come?
No, the property's open to the public. We just ask that you're there during daytime hours. There's really specific directions on our website because the access from public roads to private is about 2 miles away. So you just have to navigate a little bit of private property, and there's 2 gates that appear locked but are just latched.
Yeah, you don't
A
have
question. Yeah.
to.
We all still have the pet cemetery.
We
Oh
do,
yeah, we also have a pet
yes.
cemetery.
That's outside of the La Puerta Cemetery. It's on our
Yeah.
other 40 acres of land on the other side.
Yeah,
But we do.
we do allow family members to purchase a plot. So in the family section of our cemetery, someone is welcome to purchase an adjacent plot for their pet and be buried next to their pet.
Yeah, but
Uh,
only in the family, if
only
they
in the
have a
family section.
family plot, yeah. Mhm.
Is the people section getting full?
It's
No.
not-
So, so we have about 300 and, so we have, we have about 170 people buried there. And about the same in reservations. So per acre, Green Burial Council says 500 per acre. And we have 40 acres, and then we actually have an additional 40 acres that we could deed in the future if we ever worried we were gonna
So we
run
haven't-
out.
Yeah, we haven't even filled up an acre yet.
So plenty of
Not
space.
not filling up anytime soon.
Talk about the train.
Oh, yeah, there's a train line out there. It's the most active line between Texas and California. So we'll always have, a special guest every once in a while, but it's not that disruptive. Some people find it funny. Some people find it kind of annoying if they're speaking, but yeah.
I actually have some friends who bought there because
Because of the
the
train.
husband's a train nut.
Yep, yeah, we get that a lot. And yeah, the common joke is that they're jumping on the train and headed somewhere.
Go visit somewhere else.
All right, let's move on to Liz. Hello, Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Hamilton, and I'm a licensed funeral director. I originally got started in the funeral business because I went to a home funeral. I didn't actually know what I was getting into, but it was a friend of a friend and of the family, and the invitation just said funeral, and it was at their log cabin out in the woods. And so I showed up, and family friend John, who was deceased, was laid out in the living room lovingly in a wicker casket, very similar to the carriers that they have here at Passages and that you often use at La Puerta. So he was laid out on the, I think it was the dining room table. I think that's just what they found to put the casket on. And basically he was surrounded with flowers. And, again, I didn't know this was happening at all. So I just walked in and I'm like, there's John, there's his granddaughter covering his face in kisses, and it was just amazing. Like, his children were there, and his wife, who had taken care of him in his illness, was there, and everybody was encouraged to touch him, and it was just mind-blowing. It was amazing. I know it sounds like wow, an awesome funeral. I never thought I would say that, but and after we had he had laid in state for a few hours, we all took him up the hill, and they buried him on their property there, and we all helped fill in the grave, and it was just amazing. And it just left such an impression on me that I said, I have to make this more available for other people. So this is, again, this is more along the lines of the family doing everything themselves, and that's kind of rare, but this family did it all beautifully. And so because I want to support this, I went to mortuary school. I started working at a funeral home, became a director, and that led me here to New Mexico. And I worked at a local funeral home here first, and then I heard about Passages, which is again where we're hosted at here. And I came to work here for a time and got to learn everything about the amazing natural materials that they use in the wide range of options that they have available for natural burials, and also, scattering and other, cremation options. They have a lot of wonderful options. So that I moved to Santa Fe and started working with a company called Parting Stone, who basically takes cremated remains, which you can see those, and after the cremation is complete, and then they perform a very elaborate process of solidifying them, turning them basically into a smooth stone. Well, actually a lot of smooth stones. An average set of cremated remains is 40 to 80 stones, but this is just something that you can hold in your hand. You can place in a body of water. You can do a scavenger hunt. I'm hearing a lot of wonderful stories about things that people are doing with their stones, but I am just excited to be here today and be with these great people around me. And it's so grateful to Gail for putting all this together, and Passages for hosting this, and all of you for being here and being interested, because this is why we do what we do, because this is something that we want to offer you as an option, and we want to answer any questions you have about it.
Questions about home funerals at the moment?
I have a question about the stones. That's.
Oh,
Stones.
Sure.
I have like the home altar.
Mhm.
Multicultural options. I have two of my friends are on it already.
Mhm.
Can I make a stone out of them?
You can, we definitely, there's no shelf life for cremated remains, we can do that at any point, whether, they've been cremated for 20 years or, 2 weeks, any length of time. So, yeah, definitely. Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes the sweat blows stuff away.
Oh, right. We will help you keep them together. Yes. Yes.
Yes, I have a question about the cremation.
Mhm.
I always assumed that I get cremated but in the last couple of years, I read about the extreme carbon footprint of cremation, and I'm wondering if that's accurate, and if the industry is doing anything to offset that.
The question is about the carbon footprint of cremation and what's being done to offset
Yes.
CO2.
Yes, the carbon footprint is really pretty high. I don't have the numbers ready in my head, but basically the flame-based cremation is fueled
532 pounds of CO2.
532. Yes, it's significant, and most of that is fossil fuel usage. So either natural gas or electric. Mostly natural gas is used for that.
Yeah.
So there's growing movement, and it's legal in many states to do alkaline hydrolysis or water cremation, which has a much lower footprint, and also body composting is another very green option. I think it actually has a negative carbon. It sequesters carbon
yes.
rather than, and so does green burial as well. It sequesters carbon rather than, using carbon. So
It takes
lots of
about
options.
20 gallons of fuel for one cremation.
Mhm. Yes, it's
I've
significant.
told the story that I had solar panels on my house, and it tells me how much CO2 I'm offsetting by using, generating electricity from the sun.
Right.
And I would have to run my solar panels 14 sunny New Mexico days to offset one cremation.
Wow. And it is sunny in New Mexico.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Are we ready?
My question on the stuff.
Yes.
On the little laminated sheet yesterday,
Mhm.
all the different types of stone.
Yes.
Does each person just come out different, or is it a different process to get them to look?
Yeah, every person is different from beginning to end. So we don't, basically we add like a small amount of natural binder. I don't know if you can even see this card that we're talking about. A small amount of natural binder, which basically just keeps the cremated remains together and allows us to compress them and form them into stones. So we don't add anything for the coloration, but very often they come out this white color or a light gray, but we've seen anywhere from light green to light blue to light brown to darker colors, but every person is different. And we, we've been doing this for over 5 years, but we still don't know why every person comes out a different color, different texture.
Yeah.
Yes, we think that some of it has to do with a mineral content or a metal content, within the cremated remains. But that's something I think that makes it really special. And sometimes they'll come out completely smooth like this. Sometimes they'll have little craters in them. Can't tell where I'm at here. Whoops. Oh, it's different on the other side too. Okay. Because I was thinking you were seeing what I was seeing. So sometimes they'll have little craters. I mean, they're always very smooth to the touch, but sometimes they'll have texture or cracks. And again, it's just, we do everything we can to make a very solid and, a stone that will outlast any of us. But we don't do anything for the appearance. That's just the person's remains.
And that one remains a person to give that amount.
That's
This
actually a small scene.
This is very small. Most people, the average set of cremated remains is 40 to 80 stones. So it's significant. So, this would be probably the size, like maybe a kitty would be about this many stones. So, this is just a sample because it's quite a lot of stones. And it's nice, people either keep them all together if they choose that, or they give one to every family member, or they leave one in, favorite places or new places that the deceased never got to travel to.
And your samples are usually pet cremated remains, animals.
Yes, these are pet cremated remains. So, yeah. Oh, yes, no. And actually that's what these are here too. So we do make them out of pet cremated remains, and that's just a cooperation with our local animal shelter so that we can show what we do. But yes, these are not human. Yes.
One
Yes.
very important question, what's the cost of processing?
If you
What's
work,
the cost?
yeah, the cost varies because we have a couple of options. You can either go work through a funeral home that offers our services, and that's actually mainly what we do. Their price, they're free to set their price. So I wouldn't speak to what their pricing would be. So we do work directly with the public as well. On our website, you can just place an order for a human or for pets of any kind, even horses. We take care of horses too sometimes. And but yes, it is a lot of stones. A lot. Most people use only a portion of the remains, I would say. So, but so if we're talking about an adult human, our pricing directly on our website is $24.95. And that's for the whole amount of cremated remains or even just a portion. So basically, because our process is very hands-on, we have a wonderful team of very attention-oriented, detail-oriented people. And most of what we do is hand forming, hand mixing, hand everything. So it's a similar amount of work if you have, this much, or if you have an entire set of cremated remains. So did I actually answer your question? Yes, okay. I got a little sidetracked there, so yes,
I
thank
want
you.
to ask about home funerals well, you did home funerals in North Carolina,
Yes,
and we're here in New Mexico.
yes.
So the rules are probably a little different. But what would a family need to do, and how can they work with a funeral director to help them handle the process?
Yes, the state laws, funeral laws vary widely. So they're very different than they are, here in New Mexico than they are in North Carolina. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody here, I think that there's still a 24-hour period that you can have a home funeral, basically from the time of death until 24 hours. And then the state law requires refrigeration of some kind. Or embalming, yes, or embalming. So yes, so some sort of preservation or burial that needs to happen. So basically, probably the simplest way someone could have a home funeral in the state is basically just, make sure that the person is on hospice. We'll get to that. And make sure that the death is recorded and was attended. But after that death has occurred, the easiest thing to do is just don't call the funeral home right away. Call them the next day, take your day. Take your 24 hours that you have. And, basically once the death has occurred and been, recorded by a professional, once that has occurred, the emergency is over. There's no big hurry. I know people often are uncomfortable around the deceased and might say, can we please, move this along? But you have 24 hours. This is your quiet time with your person. You can, if you're comfortable bathing and dressing, you can do that. If you're just want to be with them, if say the person died in a bed and you just want to just leave them exactly the way they are and put flowers around them or just sit with them, you can have your own kind of personal vigil. You can invite neighbors and friends if you want to, basically that 24 hours is yours. And that's probably the easiest way to do it. I would, and then you can either work with a funeral home to help you with transporting the body, or you can transport the body yourself, but you have to have arrangements of where you're going. So, so it's good to talk about it ahead of time. But a funeral home can help you, with the death certificate. That's very important, but you can actually do that yourself. It is, a family can do that themselves. They can fill out the vital information. They can have someone from the county help get that to the doctor and get that filed. But, basically a lot of people choose to use a funeral home for the death certificate purposes because it is a little simpler and they do it all the time. So they know what they're doing. Again, this is a good thing to arrange, and ask your local funeral home about, because, every person that works at a funeral home, and let alone every funeral home, will have different levels of knowledge about this or experience, or, they will have different levels of how much they want to do themselves and how much they want you to do. So it's good to just have a good relationship with them so that you can have a plan and do that. Yes.
Would you like to take it from here?
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Garcia. I'm a funeral service practitioner here in New Mexico. I'm also licensed in Arizona. I currently work in Gallup. I'm on a border town for both states, so I have a lot of compliance, and I'm also adjacent to the Navajo Nation. A little bit more about my history. I have a bachelor's in anthropology that I received from UNM, and I did my mortuary school at Amarillo College. I'm going to be talking about traditions a little bit more betwixt people, so just so people are more aware, can deal with death better, with all the varying backgrounds that are here in our beautiful state of New Mexico. I worked in northern New Mexico for some time, and I'm an Albuquerque local, born and raised here, multi-generational. So just to give you a little idea about me. So I'm going to talk a bit about the traditions within home burial. You mentioned you were Catholic earlier, or at least, yes. Yeah, so we'll address some of that, some of the Jewish traditions, some of the Native American traditions, particularly for Pueblos. There's many Pueblos here in New Mexico. I've had the pleasure of working with them, made many friends along the way, talked to governors, as well as on the Navajo Nation. They have chapter houses, presidents that preside over them there. So I just want to talk a little bit about traditions within home burial. One, I did quite a bit here in Albuquerque, as we have a population of Mexicans that immigrate to New Mexico, is the velorio. So if you ever get invited to one, I'd say go. There's lots of good food, bit of crying, bit of laughing, bit of yelling. It's a little fiery, but the body is often laid in state. We pick them up usually, do an embalming. They are taken back to the home and then laid in state for 3 days. I think this process really helps a lot of people move through grief, and hopefully that grief turns to gratefulness. As you get to spend time, there's lots of tears, there's lots of roses on the deceased. It's kind of a beautiful tradition. So if you ever have a friend who invites you to one, or you have a friend who passed, I'd say go. It's good to make the appearance. After that, we'll do the normal Catholic Mass oftentimes. Of course, there's some Protestant traditions, and then take them to their final resting place. So just one home kind of burial. It's not complete home burial in the green fashion necessarily, but just want to make people aware. We're doing death education here, obviously. So then there's the Jewish tradition. Me and Gail talk about it quite a bit. Where the Chevra comes by. Do we have any Jewish people with us in the audience? Yeah. 70 comes in.
Hebra Kadisha.
My Jewish is bad. Hebra Kadisha. Where some ladies come by, prep the body, get them ready, put them in their garments. Takarim. There we go. And yeah, we have a a pretty significant Jewish population here in New Mexico. So if you get invited to those, another time to learn, another time to experience. We're going to do some 7 prayers. We're going to do 7 steps. It's going to be a good time.
And Tachbrahim are the burial garments. They're cotton or linen. It's not a shroud per se. Sometimes they're called shrouds, but it's actually a whole outfit, pants, but there's no opening in the feet because nobody's walking anywhere. No pockets either because you can't take it with you. And an under tunic, an over tunic, a head covering, and then ties and a sheet that wraps all around it.
Usually done in 24 hours as well,
Yes.
but not always. Of course, in modern times, people get very, very far. They're waiting for family to come, so modifies as necessary. Done plenty at La Puerta. Driven down there quite a few times. So yeah, just wanted to kind of address that. Then with Pueblos, a lot of them just use some of our services and then do a lot of the stuff at home. So we'll pick them up. Maybe they use our facility for dressing and bathing and preparation of the bodies, and they'll take them back, kind of do their own thing. If you're ever invited, that's an honor. That's a big deal for a lot of the Pueblos. I worked particularly with San Juan quite a bit, Huaque, had some great times out there, had some great services, made sure our decedents were laid to rest in the proper fashion. So it was a real honor to do that, especially through COVID. I worked through COVID. I don't know if y'all remember that, but it was an intense time for the funeral service people. And I'm sure for many of you, hope everyone passed okay who went through that, but it was a tough time. And then I work a lot with Navajo people now. So they have the option of burying on their land. It's a beautiful thing. They don't talk about death much. So if you have Navajo friends, don't talk about death very much with them. They don't want to talk about it. But oftentimes we do what I call syncretic funerals, even with the Pueblo tradition. It's going to be a mix of Mormonism and Native American beliefs, Catholic and Native American beliefs, various forms of Protestantism, Baptist is the main one I see. I've been to a tent revival Navajo funeral service, so you know, it gets interesting sometimes. With country music going, and then traditional Navajo singing in the background, and the dust flowing, and we're lowering in the cowboy fashion with straps as well. So unique experiences. Very glad to be able to experience those. I'll take questions in just a moment. But just try to ask questions, particularly with Pueblos, but with Navajo people, you kind of want to avoid the subject of death. So just want to make people aware of that as they are a growing population. Most are coming off the reservation into the cities and metropolitan areas around us and throughout the Southwest. So as they grow, just want people to know. And yeah, let's do some questions then.
What was that term you used? What else?
Syncretism.
That was like synchronicity?
More like combining two things or combining ideas, or not quite synchronicity, but say for me, I grew up Catholic, but I'm not completely Catholic, you know, so we kind of mix some different ideologies in there, or we have like a lot of Jewish tradition and things that we practice in my family. So that's just built in.
You have some
Candles in the closet.
oh, that's good.
Yeah.
The first one you talked, I couldn't hear because we were talking. Was that Latino family, Mexican?
Sure, Mexican specific that have immigrated here. So the Velorio. Yeah, Mexicanos, yeah. Sure.
Because I learned how to do traditional altars for Dia de los Muertos.
Right.
The Picado, the marigolds, all that
Right,
stuff.
the miracles.
So, yeah, and I did the tape of them singing for 9 days.
Right.
Wow.
Just chanting, mostly women.
What was the term for the ceremony?
Velorio.
Velorio?
How do you
Velorio.
spell that?
Velorio. Velorio.
Velorio.
And yeah, people construct ofrendas and those kind of things too. So yeah,
It's still lovely.
sure, sure. Other questions?
I have a comment.
Comment. Speak loudly so hear him.
I learned something about the Catholic Church when my sister died. And she had been cremated, and we decided, because of financial constraints in her family, we were all raised Catholic, that we would wait until my mother passed, and then she would be put in the casket with my mother. But what we didn't know is that somewhere around 2016, the Pope changed the rules a little bit, and if you're cremated as a Catholic, which hasn't been allowable until maybe the last 20 years, if you cut the ashes, if you save out ashes for a loved one, you can't bury that person in consecrated ground. It has to be 100% of the ashes.
That is correct.
Yeah, so so any of you who are Catholic who are planning getting a little pendant made of yourself.
Keep it all together.
We ended up after I planned a stealth move to get my sister into my mother's casket. That thankfully I didn't have to do. They relented, and because we hadn't been made aware of those things, but.
And actually cremation was okay, but in Vatican II, in the early 60s,
Right.
1960s.
But local dioceses had control over whether they would honor that, at least up until probably the 80s. Anyway, just thought I'd share.
I have one comment. I think it's important, if anyone's going to choose to do a home funeral, that they, for themselves, that they find that community that's going to do that, that's going to carry out that wish. It's really going to take a community, because one person, it's too much to ask. So you really need to find out, who's willing to participate and what roles people will play in that burial.
Well, and I think it's important also to note that a home funeral doesn't necessarily mean it happens in the home. It doesn't necessarily mean that the family does everything. It can be a lot of things, but it is that participation of the family that or loved ones. And I say family in a broad term because it's not necessarily next of kin. It can be chosen family as well, people who have cared for you throughout life. So I think I'm drawing the blank of National Alliance of Home Funerals.
National Home Funeral.
National Home Funeral Alliance. They have a lot of resources that just describe all the various levels of a home funeral, what it can look like. And it really is, to me, I think a home funeral is just the family or the friends, they're taking that into their hands and doing what is meaningful to them in whatever way that is. So
yeah, we often say that, if you want to take this route, you always have the option to push the pause button and call a funeral home to take on the tasks that's overwhelming. So that's always there's always a fail safe. So that's, if people are interested in that there's always that backup.
And I'll chime in as the funeral home really quick.
Yeah.
So I get a lot of questions about home burial, right? People want to be buried on their land. You want to be home, right? Home's the best place ever. So here in New Mexico, it's kind of a county by county thing for regulations. Albuquerque is going to be a tougher one. Santa Fe is going to be a tougher one. I'm out in McKinley County, where we just got to mark where you are and be away from the road and any water sources. For Navajo land, there's pretty much no rules on it. You could absolutely have your burial site as long as it's your land. With Pueblos, a lot of them have community cemeteries. Navajo lands, community cemeteries. But if you're trying to get buried at your house, remember that's going to have to be disclosed eventually if the property's ever sold. So that's going to have a lot of effects on its property value. Just want to make you aware. Of course, you can do it, but maybe someone moves in 100 years and they're like, Ethel's out back. We go say hi. So yeah, just the funeral home is there to help kind of give you guidance. Of course, there's all the costs associated with it, but I look into the law, study it, call the county clerk, figure those things out for you, and make sure it all goes smooth, get the disclosures and all that kind of stuff. So I'm there to help you in the legal aspect too. Of course, I'm not a lawyer, but I can look into it, ask the questions, And it can be somewhat of a daunting task if it's not figured out beforehand. We're not going to meet that 24 hours. So,
Yep.
Let's designate a family funeral or a family cemetery ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yes, and Claire mentioned the National Home Funeral Alliance as a great resource. I was actually on the board for them for a few years, and they have a lot of state by state regulation listings. It's not a lot of detail, but usually there'll be links in there too that you can look to, sites like NOLO and other law sources. So you can find a lot of information there. And I think they recently published a free ebook about how to have a home funeral. I think that's available on their website. So they're doing their best to get that information out there. But yes, again, kind of reiterating what everybody's saying here, the more you plan ahead of time and communicate with your family about what you want, because they're going to be the ones that are taking care of you. So make sure that one, they know what to do, two, they know how to do it. So, and again, if they get overwhelmed, funeral homes are happy to help out, and no judgment. And, the average funeral home, I would say, and the average funeral director is pretty supportive of families participating in whatever ways that they want and legally can. But, most funeral directors, if you just, even if you're just doing a fully traditional service with a funeral home, you can do something as simple as, style your loved one's hair in the funeral home. Like any funeral director would be very happy to facilitate that for you, or help dress. There's a lot of different ways that you can bring aspects of that, caring for your loved one, your family member, while just making it a hybrid with a traditional funeral. So whatever is feasible, and, whatever you can and are able to do for that one. There's a lot of different ways that you can bring elements of that in. What is that word again?
Syncretism.
Syncretism. Yes. So that's maybe another form of syncretism. So kind of a hybrid home funeral and traditional funeral. You can do, whatever, again, your family's comfortable doing.
I think you guys were going to talk about hospice involvement.
So yeah, I guess if you're talking about home funerals, that really is the easiest scenario. And at this point in New Mexico, probably the only scenario that really would work with a home funeral. And the reason for that is that death is expected. They don't have to go to OMI for the cause of death to be determined.
Office of the Medical Investigator.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Office of the Medical Investigator, yes. And the doctor is overseeing that person, so they can sign off on that death certificate pretty quickly. So that's something that we communicate with families a lot, is if you really want to do a home funeral, you need to think about that and get the person on hospice if you think it's imminent. So yeah. And I don't know if you have anything else to add on that.
I don't know, basically just that's going to simplify things a lot. That's even if, whether you're doing a home funeral, green burial, or even just a regular traditional, or not traditional, I use that word.
Conventional.
Yeah, conventional.
Yeah.
So yes, a hospice is a great way to make sure that, your loved one their wishes are, as honored as possible, and that, the medical examiner doesn't need to get involved, because that can be a very traumatic process for a lot of people if they, plan something, plan to have a funeral, and then the medical investigator said, actually, we need to take them in, and that can delay for days or even weeks, just depending on, the cause of death and what the medical investigator sees as necessary. So if you're, under hospice and your death is supervised, then it's going to be a lot simpler. And it's, the Office of the Medical Investigator doesn't step in and take over that case. And then in that case, they, that department does what they see fit, and your wishes are, what they're, and I don't mean to say anything bad about them at all. There's a lot of great people that work for them, and they are just doing what they can to make sure that, people that are dying are, it's documented why they died, and they're just trying to protect people. There's a lot of great people that work there. So I'm not trying to say anything bad about them. They're just doing their jobs. Just help them do their jobs by getting on hospice.
And I think they
Yes.
would agree too,
Yeah.
that
Yes.
they don't
Right.
want people coming into there. So they,
I've worked there, it's busy.
yeah.
And you can re-up hospice if it's not like you have a terminal illness, but you're afraid that you might pass away at home. You just talk to your doctor, and every 6 months you get re-upped for hospice.
Mhm,
That's a good way if you do live alone.
mhm.
What was the, I missed about the 24 hours. What was that about?
So in New Mexico, someone can be outside of refrigeration or not embalmed or not buried for up to 24 hours. After 24 hours, they have to be cooled essentially, or embalmed or buried. So most home funerals happen within 24 hours.
Yeah.
So if they're doing no embalming, or the funeral home doesn't pick up and put them in a refrigerator for,
That would still be green to have them in the refrigerator.
yeah.
Yeah, of
mhm.
course.
Yeah, people have that all the time.
Yeah, a body can be in refrigeration for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so embalming fluid is a preservative, but so is refrigeration. It slows decomposition. So, yeah, so you can still have a green burial even if you've been in refrigeration for 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's one of the primary roles of funeral homes
Exactly.
in this, potential home funeral option, is that they have the refrigeration. And most of the time are very happy to help you out with that. But yes, that's a great way to have a good working relationship with your funeral home, which we recommend. Again, plan ahead, talk to them before you need it.
There's a question from the chat in regards to equine burials. Do you offer any help with transportation of remains?
We don't have the we don't have the facilities or the capacity to transport that large of an animal.
Yeah,
But
that's-
I don't know if some funeral homes have that ability,
That was
or
for a horse.
yeah.
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah,
We've
yeah,
had
that
a few
is-
people ask us about that, and we essentially tell them you have to get the horse to the
Yeah.
pet
We
burial
don't-
ground
We
because
don't have a vehicle. We
Yeah.
do have machinery at the burial ground that can assist, but the transportation is something we don't have.
Yeah.
We typically bury people, so.
Yeah.
But
One time, before I was the Doyenne of Death, I was a public relations professional, and I did PR for the 4th of July concert on the West Lawn of the Capitol on PBS. And the night before, when they were doing the rehearsal for the 1812 overture, and they set off the cannons, a horse had a heart attack and died right near the US Capitol. And I saw a crane had come to pick up the horse.
yeah,
It's a
Yep.
hard, it's difficult.
They definitely are. And your average funeral home is set up to serve human remains, and their moving equipment would be for that. I think it would be a very unusual funeral home. Well, some funeral homes do have like a separate pet side, and horses are not quite pets, but they're not quite not pets. So basically, I think it would be a very, very unique funeral home that would be able to help with that. Just that would even have the machinery for that, because that's just not within their normal.
I've helped
Day-to-day.
with a similar situation where a cowboy was buried with his horse. His horse was also old and euthanized, but they just walked the horse up and the horse and him went together. So a lot of cowboys do that.
That seems to be, that would be the simplest. practice.
Yeah, so just
But,
it
yeah.
was on their own land. The horse corral wasn't far, but
Yeah.
him and the horse went together. They're riding into the sunset. Slowly whistling.
Where is your burial site?
Our cemetery?
Yeah.
Yeah, so our cemetery is it's near Berlin on the way to Mountain Air off of Highway 47 around mile marker 3, between mile marker 3 and 4. Yep, we're right near the Monzano Mountains.
Funeral home, for the transport?
Yes, yeah, they do. Yeah, funeral homes will transport. Family can get a burial transit permit and transport themselves. Oftentimes we can do the transportation on behalf of the family if it's from a funeral home to the cemetery. But
Within Albuquerque.
within Albuquerque,
Yeah.
I want to chime in there too.
Okay, I was gonna say, talk about burial
transit permits. Yeah.
Yes.
So I give a lot of burial transit permits all the time. Many people that I interact with want to transport on their own. Transporting from Phoenix can be expensive. Transporting from Albuquerque or Santa Fe can be expensive to my chapel, right? They want to use our services, but want to save some money there. So I'm going to tell y'all, don't be driving around with a dead body unless you have this permit. If you happen to get pulled over, guess what? That cop is going to have some questions. So you're going to want this piece of paper to hand over to him and go, no, it's perfectly fine. This is the legal transportation of the dead. I'm allowed to transport the dead just anytime because I've gone through all kinds of licensure and things like that. But I still have my license on me all the time, just in case I don't want to have to deal with all those issues. So call us up. We can file the death certificate. We can get you that transit permit before you get it moving. Okay.
And who issues that transit permit?
That is the New Mexico State Vital Records.
Okay,
So yeah, they're the issuing office. They're the same people who do the death certificate. I'm licensed, registered with them, and we'll get the death certificate going. We're gonna get some vital information, job, name, social, date of birth, date of death, all that kind of stuff. Who's signing the death certificate? Once I get that, I can print it out, give it to you, and we have a legal transport.
Yeah.
You know, I'm never really off work. I can log in online.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the funeral homes doing it. If a family is trying to do that themselves,
They have a
they're
direct
very
line.
limited. So they actually have to mail in. So that's why having a funeral home help with that process is
You can get them
so
at the
much
same time.
easier for people rather than the families trying to do that themselves.
All
Yeah.
funeral homes have a person on call every day of the year, always and forever.
people die.
Yeah, people-
anytime.
Yeah, Bureau of Violence Statistics is
Yeah.
banker's hours. So
Yeah. And less in some places.
yeah.
Yeah, I love the film Little Miss Sunshine.
Oh, yeah.
Because they put grandpa's dead body in the back of the van and they do get stopped by a police officer. It's like they don't have a burial transit.
Good job on regulation. Gabe.
Oh, does
There- there-
do cooling pads count as refrigeration so the body can be kept home longer?
So the regulation says temperature controlled environment.
Yeah.
So
It's pretty
temperature
open.
controlled environment.
Sounds like it counts to me.
Well, yeah.
Well, that's kind of what the Home Funeral Alliance says is, and also nobody's going to be knocking down your door at 24 hours being like, you need to get them in the
Yeah.
ground right now.
Yeah.
But you know, yeah, temperature, we say if you think it's going to be more than 24 hours for that home funeral to happen, you need to start cooling.
You should probably start cooling it immediately. Get that
Yeah.
room temperature down because temperature is your best friend in that scenario, and you want to keep it cool so that everything gets slowed. And if you are going to use gel ice packs and stuff like that, you should change them frequently.
Yeah, because decomposition will set in pretty quickly if you're not chilling in
Yeah.
some manner.
If it's a warm summer day, and you don't, yeah,
If it's winter, you can just.
yeah, it's a little easier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In the film, that there were members of the family or friends were the ones who were putting the dirt in.
Yep.
Yeah. So
But all you're very senior and they can't do that.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, those people chose to close. That family chose to close the grave. Yeah, so I went and got extra shovels, and we all took part. But
But
we do
if-
have a tractor to
Yeah.
close the grave, and then I do that by myself if needed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the families can choose whether or not they want to close by hand.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a
Yeah.
yeah. They don't have to dig the grave either. So
Yeah. They can if they want, but nobody's asked to do that yet.
Yeah.
So.
well, they have. It just takes too long. So, yeah.
I help bury all the time too. I'm always out there shoveling.
Yeah, yeah, the funeral directors always get involved. We pull in.
Yep.
Keeps me fit.
Kind of strange, but how has it affected your life Again, that's what, and how.
It's, it's really beautiful to see how people remember their loved ones. So it's definitely a reminder every day that, time is precious and, to really enjoy what we have because it's fleeting. So, but yeah, but you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And just having, seeing people have the opportunity to remember their loved ones in the way that they feel is meaningful,
Yeah.
has been really rewarding for me. I think just seeing the closure that people get by having that participation and being involved, I think it's really a beautiful thing, even though it's a really sad thing too.
Yeah. It's
It's
good.
part of life. So
Yeah, it's good to know that we're giving someone a good goodbye for their loved one. That's the reward for sure.
Good name for a book.
It's segue.
Yes.
Wrap up statement, either you?
I was just going to say, referencing your question, being in the funeral industry has helped me appreciate, a lot of deaths are expected, but I've seen a lot of people die from a lot of different things that we're not expecting it at all. So it's just really helped remind me, don't put it off. Do it now. You don't know how much time you have, communicate with your loved ones. Tell your mom you love her when you see her, if you get a chance, give somebody a hug. And yeah, you don't know what's going to happen. So just say you love somebody or give them a hug when you can.
For me, we're here to help you craft the memory you want, the memory you see fit. We want you to walk away feeling a little bit better from a funeral. I think the funeral ritual is extremely important. I want grief to turn to gratefulness, that we spent that time, that we got to see them, that we got to eat food with them, that we laughed, that we went on adventures, that we argued even. Grateful for all of it. And so we're here to just give you direction for that on the funeral director side. You see a lot of things. We've done a lot of funerals. I'm busy constantly. And we're here to make it happen however you see fit and give some recommendations on the way. So thank a funeral director once in a while. We're out here for you.